Alright, this is a topic I'd been really wanting to talk about for a while. There's a lot of lack of information out there, really, and a little bit of misinformation based on that lack of information. We'll just hang out in my cornfield while I talk about this, but why GMOs suck, and yeah, why the feed that you make out of them sucks. So, yeah, I've been hearing some farms talk about GMOs and some, YouTubers that just don't really know what they're talking about. They're not bad people. They just, are facing some realities out in the field and blah blah blah. Anyways, GMOs. Here is my organic field. It's the end of the year. Stuff's starting to senesce. Doesn't look super pretty, but our yields are fine, We can grow organic crops with no chemicals. There's a little weird stuff, but we can feed the world just fine. But for some reason, people want to defend GMOs. And generally it goes like this. Oh, you can read these studies that show GMOs are perfectly inert substances to humans. They dissipate once a droplet of water touches them or hit the ground. They break down and they're not there, blah, blah, blah. GMO crops are no different, even though they're genetically modified. This doesn't change anything about the end product. All of this is super false, and it's like by definition. One way to investigate this is, and no one talks about, how do GMOs survive the pesticides they're genetically modified to be sprayed with? Sprays kill everything else except for the genetically modified crops. How does this happen? And this is really linked to a lot of problems in the U.S. food supply. How this works is genetically modified crops are modified. Well, here let's go. How do plants die from Roundup, for example? What Roundup does is it's a very intense chelator of certain vital micronutrients. Manganese, boron, and zinc particularly. But how it kills plants is through disrupting the enzymes that synthesize proteins in plants. So this enzyme that uses manganese to make proteins is disrupted by Roundup. And most plants, there's more resistance to it now, but, most plants die because they can't synthesize these proteins that are vital to them living. And how Roundup ready plants, corn and beans, and, alfalfa now and other crops, they are genetically modified so that this enzyme can still function. But it doesn't function the same. It produces less protein in general, and it doesn't produce all the same proteins. It is, these plants are able to grow without some of these proteins that are vital for non-GMO plants. And these are proteins that, contain manganese, and some of these other micronutrients. And it just so happens that humans are not genetically modified to be able to survive without these proteins. So essentially, these GMO crops have less protein in general, more carbohydrates, and they have little to none of some of these other proteins, micronutrient containing proteins that are frankly necessary for good human health. So when people say that these GMO crops and the feed they produce are no different, perfectly good for the environment, that is wrong and wrong. They are lacking a number of proteins that make food healthy, and then on the other side of it, they are toxic to the environment. This is another, there's studies that say that they're dissipate and are non-toxic, and there are many real-life world examples and some studies that show this is totally false. If you want to check out Don Huber, he used to work at the USDA on these herbicides, and he is intimately knowledgeable of how they work, and there's plenty of studies that show that Roundup persists in the soil. It also, it was originally made as a antibiotic in general, so it kills soil life, and like I was saying, it chelates these important micronutrients as well. So your soil becomes more and more lifeless as you use this Roundup product, glyphosate, and it has fewer of these micronutrients available, and then less and less biological activity in your soil, less and less of the things, biology is what breaks down these herbicides eventually, and so you are eliminating the thing that cleans up these chemicals from the system. So over time, you get Roundup building up in your soil. And Roundup is not good for humans to ingest either. I mean, it very much not good for your health, in that it, reduces the availability of these micronutrients. But the bigger problem in my mind is its effect on our food supply and reducing the nutritional value of our food, and that's really at the heart of our obesity epidemic, is empty calorie food. And this all goes back to, I believe, our GMO crops that dominate the food supply at the base of it. You are what you eat eats. So all these cattle, all these byproducts that make up our food supply, that are just fed and based off of bulk GMO crops, it's just really lacking in some important human nutrition. And I would argue this is really at the heart of some of our mental health deterioration in general. I mean, I believe the rise of autism, which does exist. I know some people like Vosh just think autistic people have been around here all the time, and they have, but we aren't stupid. There has been a rise in these problems in recent years, and no, it's not related to vaccines whatsoever. It coincides with the rise of GMO crops and Roundup. And it's really quite simple. I mean, the same micronutrients that Roundup chelates and makes unavailable, and are not, present in abundance in the grain produced, our manganese is vital for our brain function, as well as other micronutrients. And I think it's kind of obvious to me anyways, but you also look at the rise of chronic wasting disease in deer and these other like brain rotting diseases that seem to be concentrated in big corn growing country. Why are all these deer with mush brain all down in GMO crop country? It's because they're eating tons and tons of corn that makes their brain weak and makes them very susceptible to these diseases. So yeah, and us humans are no different. When such a huge percent of our diet is GMO crops that are devoid of certain, proteins and micronutrients that are vital to our health, and specifically our brain health, we're going to end up with, these neurological disorders and bad mental health in general. It's GMO crops not having good nutrition in them. Yeah. So this is organic corn. You can feed the world with organics. It takes more work. It's more expensive. I get the problem with not having, organic available at an affordable price where you are. That's a huge problem. But if that's the reason why you're not organic, just say that and don't try and defend GMO crops with misinformation. But yeah, the problem isn't organics itself. It's not a scam. It's how we should be producing food. And I think we can have, cheaper organic feed. We just need more farmers, and we need to be more vertically integrated. It's absurd the amount of markup that these organic crops get in between the field and the feed mill. When I was doing research on what to price my feed, certified organic feed that I produce, calling around to some of these elevators that provide it, they're charging, one was charging $2 a pound, which is insane. My chicken feed is 40 cents a pound, which is a lot, but farms can use it and turn a profit, certainly charging a premium, but $2 a pound's insane. And if you look at the organic grain prices that farmers are selling for, it's 1/10 that. Like, organic corn's, I don't know, $8 a bushel or something like that. That's like less than 20 cents a pound. And that's what makes up a large part of the feed ration. So most of the problem is availability and scale. We need to make organic growing a bigger thing. And that takes time, and we need more co-ops and vertical integration and all that. But don't defend GMOs just because they're cheap and you want to use them. GMOs suck. They're very bad for our land. They're bad for our health. And, non-GMO, that's another misconception. Non-GMO crops, they're not genetically modified to do this, weird thing with their protein synthesis, but they are always sprayed with more chemicals, as in, like, there's old school herbicides that kill broadleaves and grasses and prevent stuff from germinating, and you basically need to make a concoction of several of those to spray on your corn or beans or whatever to prevent weeds. And that's how non-GMO feed is produced. It's with plenty of herbicide, and some of them are, scarier in how they work, but yeah. So that's not really the greatest solution either. I guess the other thing I want to talk about is GMO crops are inherently more unhealthy themselves. They seem to build up a whole lot of nitrates in their sap or ammonia, and this attracts bugs. What's his name? He's done some work on Tom Dykstra. So basically, GMO soybeans need to be sprayed with insecticide almost every year because they attract aphids so bad because they're unhealthy. It's unavoidable, basically, that they're gonna attract aphids, and so insecticides are sprayed on those a lot. And that's horrible because insecticides are a direct neurotoxin for humans. So you're getting that along with the whole GMO effect. But yeah, so when people talk about how GMO feed is exactly the same and we need to use it and it's environmental, blah, 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 they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm sure they'll cite a bunch of studies from universities that say it's all great and wonderful. They are not acknowledging the reality of how these research institutions work. They are completely beholden to these big agribusinesses, the chemical companies, the seed companies, that they provide them with their funding, and the fine folks that are researchers at these universities, they understand, maybe not explicitly, that the results of their research very much dictate whether they're going to get more money or not. And if you put out a bunch of research that shows the reality that these chemicals are building up in our soil, they are bad for our health, they are bad for the environment, they will not get funding again, and they will kind of get shunned from the community because, I mean, in reality, science is a club. They're a tribe. They want to fit in. They want to be part of the club. They don't want to get kicked out. Okay? And there's plenty of research, people like Don Huber, that, can tell you the truth, can give you the bigger perspective, the on-the-ground effects of these crops. And GMOs suck. They are bad in many different ways. And if you want healthy feed, you should try and go organic if you can. And it's tough. But, if we get creative, I think we can find some solutions.